Welcome to Lunch with the Sharpe Crew. So happy that you guys are with us today, a little bit past noon on the East Coast. And we have with us the crew, the man, the myth, the legend himself. It is Michael Vass. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Happy to be back and seeing everybody once again.
Yes, it has been a bit, and it used to be Wednesdays, now it's Thursdays, and that's because we decided Thursdays are cooler. We just decided that because we're the cool people. We've decided that, haven't we? Indeed, we have. I'm sure. Also with us is PhD herself, Charla Burnett. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Larry. Thank you. Just trying to adjust to the cold and the time change.
Yes, absolutely. So, look, the issue I want to bring up here is something that a lot of people are talking about, both here and abroad, obviously, but I think more abroad right now. I think more abroad, but both. The idea of what is authoritarianism, right? What is it? Is it the government? Is it the society? When is it used? What is it? Mike, you mentioned to me before that you have almost a little definition on it. Tell me, please.
Yeah, I tend to believe that, and I think that the real world impact is authoritarianism is a government, a system of government that restricts and essentially micromanages individuals' lives. It is a lack of freedom, a lack of individuality, a lack of choice. That's where we get, that's the whole authoritarian part of it. It is the direction, the guidance, the overwhelming pressure against individuals and individuality.
Okay, I like that. Charla, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like Michael's definition. I think that's fairly accurate. I think that there are different ways for which different governments kind of push authoritarian policies or general real acts of violence. And so I think maybe we can dive into that a little bit more and maybe come up with some examples of how that is expressed in the United States and elsewhere.
I feel like, as a general rule, people tend to link authoritarianism with a lack of freedom, right? So generally speaking, and I think it's a general rule, right? It's hard to say what is authoritarianism. Like, oh, that state is, that country is. I feel like it's almost like a spectrum because, you know, if I have more freedom, I feel like, oh, I'm good, right? I'm not authoritarian. If I have less freedom, I feel like I am. But I'll go one step further. If the specific freedoms that a government tries to limit or eliminate, either one, are the ones that I care about, I feel like the government is authoritarianism, where someone else may not care about that, they may not, right? The best example probably would be, I mean, the most popular example would be someone like, you know, if we're talking Germany 1940 and you're Jewish versus an ethnic German. If you're an ethnic German, you might go, this state isn't so bad. If you're Jewish, you're like, holy crap, oh my God, it's the worst state on the planet. But it's the same state.
Yeah, I think that's when authoritarian actually starts to begin. Like there's a difference between, oh, I don't like this, I feel like it takes away from my freedom. It's one, the actual like violence occurs, whether it be political violence or whether it be physical violence, where it's not like, oh, you can't do this because you're about to harm someone. That's preventative like governance. And that's essentially what our governments are there to regulate businesses and other political like entities from harming people. But it's when they then do harm themselves that are actually stopping the rights.
Yeah, I think most people would agree that if someone's trying to hurt you in some way, that's not authoritarianism. That's stopping you from hurting somebody. I get that part. I think that's true. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, but it's not violence. It's not about violence. The definition and the whole point, and we can take this to the modern context, not just the old context looking at World War II. Let's look at the real world context. It's not about violence. It's the dehumanization and is the restriction of individual freedoms that makes the difference. We're not talking about a law that someone doesn't like. We're talking about removing their right as an individual, as a human being, to make a choice and to effect that choice, such as, very simply, the jab. We saw
Sure.
a huge movement both at the federal and state level amongst a large number of states, especially those that tend to be more blue, more progressive leaning. And the more progressive they became, the more extreme they became in their enforcement of this idea that you must receive an experimental medication in your body, that we are finding out even today from CNN just an hour ago, releasing studies that are saying that this actually may cause the elderly to have more strokes. You have dehumanized individuals, telling them that they are either the good people who are getting this jab, or you're the bad people who are refusing to do this. Remember Joe Biden coming onto national TV, America is fed up with you. He was fed up with you. How dare you not follow his
But hold on. I want to give a
Go ahead.
little bit of pushback. Joe brings this up, and Joe says it's an inherent use of force. And I think laws are by default force. So if I pass a law that says something, I mean, what's the old saying, libertarian saying? At the end of every law is a guy or a gal with a gun who will put you in a cage. And if you don't want to go in that cage, that person's going to shoot you. So I think law does mean that, right?
But it has more than just the law. Like, there are laws that in themselves grant more power to control, but it also has to be the use of media and disinformation to control the narrative. And so that way they don't have to pass laws. They can paint a picture of, oh, well, this group of people are really bad, or
got it.
This is the way that things have to be, like religiously, for instance, or morally, without even having to necessarily pass laws.
So, okay, give me an example of that. What do you mean by, like, my head immediately goes to a law. Maybe it's because my libertarianism is coming out, right? But that's where my head, it goes right to law. Like, you're gonna pass a law that you got to do X, Y, or Z. If you don't, we're gonna, somehow fine you. If you don't pay your fine, you're going to jail. Whatever.
We know that the United States government's been collecting data from corporations that are then used to manipulate the public. I mean, that's that's one aspect.
That's not authoritarian.
Manipulating the government, manipulating the way that you think about the government and you think about your role in society is authoritarianism. It's the same way that corrupt. Hitler and the Nazi regime used the media and controlled what data and information was spread as a form of authoritarianism.
No. There's a difference between corruption and having a corrupt government, no matter what type of government that may be or what kind of organization it may be. And then there is another thing that is authoritarian. Authoritarian is separate of anything that may be corrupt. You may disagree, and the government may not.
Isn't corruption by default authoritarianism? Because if you are corrupt, right, whether that means either you're taking money you shouldn't take, using money you shouldn't use, doing something that's not transparent, right? You're doing something that is now affecting someone else's life, right? Because if I'm taking your tax dollars, Mike, and I'm giving it to people that you don't know or you don't agree with, isn't that a form of authoritarianism?
No. You're looking at corruption is not limited to, how I am taking from one person or another. Corruption is a failure, a breakdown of what is the expected or proper means of doing something. Okay, I'm a politician. I'm not supposed to take a bribe, but I can. And taking a bribe is corruption, not authoritarian.
So political scientists now essentially all agree that authoritarian regimes over time have become less reliant on violence and mass repression because it's actually harder to control in the long term.
It's true.
And so they focus more on the manipulation of information as a means of control. And so authoritarians increasingly seek to create like the appearance of good governance to conceal state repression and imitate democracy. So they create like a shadow system where they can undermine democracy, but in the broad public sense, they think that a democracy is actually happening.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because most people don't know this. It's an old saying. And the saying is, democracies don't war on each other. And that is absolutely not true. Imperial Japan was a democracy. Nazi Germany was a democracy. They were broken democracies. Maybe to your point, Michael, maybe corrupt democracies, maybe to your point. But my point is that they were democracies. The North and the South in our Civil War, They were both democracies, right? So democracies do war on each other. What I would add to what you're saying, Charla, is not just does an authoritarian government, democracy or not, use propaganda. I would argue that they use specific tools, like, as an example, creating outside enemies so that you will ignore what's happening within your own world, right? You don't care about how bad I am to you because that other guy is just so horrible. We've got to band together so that we can go. What's the 1984 quote? The war was not meant to be won; it was meant to continue. Am I saying that right? That may be the wrong quote, but
George Orwell.
Yes. So I think, Mike, I'm leaning towards Charlie. You got to help me on this one. I feel like this propaganda piece is authoritarian.
And it looks different between like an autocratic and an oligarchic government, because in an autocratic society, like it's very easy to be like, oh, that's authoritarian because there's only one person in power. So thinking like North Korea, where if it's oligarchical, especially when it has a two-party system where you have the illusion that there is some sort of pluralism within the government, that's when the use of manipulation is usually leaned upon.
I would say that follows Iran also. That's also Iran. Iran is similar. Iran is not really a dictatorship. I mean, it's a theocracy, but it really is an oligarchy, right? There really are certain elites who control the country.
Yeah, it's the religious leaders, the individual ones who are able to call the fatwas, with the overall leader being, of course, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, and this one happens to be Khamenei. But and that's one of the examples of a autocratic government I would actually point to is Iran, or Hamas is an autocratic a type of government. Hezbollah, the Houthis are very similar to that. I knew that we were going to hear at some point that we were going to have America implied to be a autocratic government. It isn't.
Oh, it's not implied. No, it's said. It's not implied.
And it isn't.
No,
it directly isn't. We may be corrupt, some may say.
You just used the jab as an example.
That's a form of corruption of the government. That doesn't mean the government does not look at individuals. American government does not look at individuals in America as tools or dehumanized. It does have corrupt laws.
We gerrymander everything.
I think also, I don't want us to stray away to pinpointing again that like saying a government is for sure authoritarian when they have authoritarian and democratic processes. Like there are some democratic processes, but then there are also some very clear authoritarian traits that the United States has. And I think, as you were saying, Larry, biggest one is of course, minimal like political mobilization and the repression of anti-regime activities. And you've 100%. Seen this like very much in the Occupy Wall Street movement. Like anytime we actually have mass movement in the United States to change something, there is a complete repression by the government to do that.
No, I disagree with that because, by the way, I was covering the Occupy Wall Street, and in particular, its outreach, the Occupy Binghamton movement. It was a bunch of cats screaming about why they felt bad, and it had no purpose, no direction.
It did have a purpose. It had a manifesto. It had very clear policy points and objectives that it wanted to go forth, and that included the definancialization of our market system.
That may be fantastic for some of the people that you were able to speak to. I know that when I was covering it, and recording it and publishing the responses that I was receiving from people and that were actually there, we have at least 32 different answers about why they were there, what was the purpose of this, how it was supposed to move forward.
I gotta say, he's right, Charla. I was down there in Wall Street.
That happens in every social movement.
Hold on. No. He was in Binghamton. I was in New York City. I was actually down there. I was eating lunch every single day down there, trying to support people.
But why does that matter what the why was when the suppression occurred?
No,
See,
and you're assuming that there was suppression.
Points right now. You're asking where you're talking. You're trying to
No, I'm trying to clarify.
So that whatever the movement was trying to do wasn't good because they weren't coherent. That doesn't matter anyways. What matters is the United States government infiltrated that movement and purposely tried to destabilize it.
Two pieces I want to bring up. I say Mike's 100% right on the idea that the people had no idea what they were doing. That was obvious. The people, there may have been, to be fair with you, Charla, there may have been people at the top of the
but
movement.
But if the government is purposely trying to destabilize that.
Let me just do 2 points. These are 2 separate points. You're right. I'm just clarifying both points. Point number 1, Michael was right. The people had no idea. I talked to them. They were lost. They were more worried about having drum circles than they were about any political anything. If the leaders had a plan, they were terrible at disseminating it to the people on the ground. I'm not saying they didn't have a plan. I'm saying their communication was terrible, or the people were in, or something, because the people on the ground had no idea. I was there too. I spoke to them. They were clueless. So that's point 1. Point 2 that you're bringing up. I think you're totally right, Charlie. The government, of course, is that. And the point I'm going to bring up now is we're now looking at the Twitter files and places like that. And the story is this only attacked the right. And that's not true. To your point, Charla, they actually attacked everybody who wasn't with the mainstream. Most of that happened to be the right, because I think because Biden was president, right? I think most of that was the right. But they also hammered the far left, too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And this is, again, the illusion that Democrats represent this left movement, when in fact that they don't. I would, again, put them into the establishment. And that includes Republicans.
There are establishment wings of both parties, and there are fringe wings of it.
I don't feel like the fringe wings on the left, though, even participate.
Oh, sure they do. You're not looking at what's happening in the real world.
But not at voting.
Not in voting, not in government, not in political power.
Mike, they're not voting.
They don't have,
the far left is not voting.
They don't win, but they are voting, and they are definitely trying to pass legislation, and they are proposing
maybe like three congressmen that you could consider maybe more left leaning, but
there is such a thing as the Progressive Caucus, you know.
No. Hold on. I'm gonna be very fair, Mike. The Progressive Caucus in the Congress is not left. It's not. It is left compared to the right, like it's further left than the right is. That's true, but they're not leftists. They're liberals, and there is a difference, right? They're corporatist.
I wouldn't call them liberals.
How many environmentalists or queer people hold big leadership positions in the United States government?
Who cares? Well, that's a political.
Locally,
that's an issue.
Locally, it's different. Locally, it's different. But as a major like federal government establishment, I don't think it's fair to say that there is equal representation of leftists as there is people on the extreme right, especially like neo-Christian right.
Women being Christian is extreme.
There are some extreme Christians.
She said neo. She said neo.
I said neo.
She did.
Okay, what's a neo-Christian? I don't even know what that is.
It's usually has to do with white supremacy. They usually go hand in hand.
So it's a white supremacist. It's not about religion. It's about
but they use religion as a tool to make even basic discussions about government more focused on religion, and tries to build a party around religion instead of the basis of their white supremacist ideologies.
So are you talking about a theocracy, or are you talking about white supremacy?
I think that they would love to have both.
Okay, because I've never heard of
it's the reason why Jesus is white on everyone's mantle.
There's a point. I mean, if you look at some of the white supremacist movements, many of them base their movements upon Christianity. That's true. Many of them have crosses in their symbols. They use Jesus and God and Christianity as part of their ideology. I think that is true. To be clear, I'm not saying all Christians are white supremacists.
No,
but the vast majority of white supremacists are Christian. That's true. The vast majority of white supremacists are Christian.
In the United States.
Yes. I would say even across the world. If you go to Russia, where there are massive white supremacists in Russia,
they are very different. They are very
correct, but most of them are Eastern Orthodox Christian. Most are. The vast majority are.
Orthodox Christians are not necessarily what most people in America would consider Christian or any other.
And that just goes back to the Roman Catholic Church and the history, of the Crusades,
Greek
which
Orthodox
was a very racist movement.
See, now here's my point.
No, Mike, you're taking this personally, and this isn't a personal issue.
No, I'm not taking it personal.
Right? I'm not, and I'm not trying to speak with Charla. I don't think either one of us is saying that Christian equals white supremacist. We're saying most white supremacist groups do have Christianity as a basis or as a critical part
and
of
Christians
their
should
ideology.
be angry about that.
Correct. And exactly. Christians should be angry about that. Correct.
Then we should be using the proper terms. We're talking about white supremacists and they use the means of religion or other things. But to say neo-Christian,
But you
is to
have
imply it's about Christianity.
neo-Christian Republican representatives that are in Congress.
What's that? Say it again.
You have neo-Christian representation.
Neo-Christian.
Neo-Christian.
White supremacist.
White
By your
supremacist
definition, white supremacist.
representation.
Who is that?
Yes.
Who is that?
There are loads of them. I'm
Who?
not going to sit here and name all of them
Then
off.
don't say that
because nobody's going to self-identify as a neo-Christian.
Okay, so you're making an accusation based on your
I don't think it's an accusation. I think it's a very understandable statement that's been well documented in the United States' history.
Name them. Who are we talking about in Congress right now is a neo-Christian, which you define as a white supremacist. Name them. You can't just say that's genuinely true, because you would hold me to the same standard to say, no, Mike, you can't just make that blanket statement and just put that accusation on a group of people and then say, oh, well, see, that's why they're the bad guys. That you can't do that.
Again, no one is going to self-identify as a
I'm not asking for them to self-identify.
They're going to pass policies that segregate Black people. They're going to they do it through their actions, not necessarily as a self-identified.
Then
look at any of the voting.
I want to see
and gerrymandering and the stopping people from voting.
Then you
all
tell
of
me
that
who you identify.
I have a problem with this, Charla. I do. If I'm okay if you're saying they won't self-identify. I get it. I agree. Most people who are doing bad things, they will validate their bad behavior and don't think they're doing bad things. That's most people. I agree. Most bad people don't think they're bad people.
I mean, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gozer of Arizona. I mean, these people go to white nationalist conferences. I don't have to sit here and name every single one of them. It's very clear.
So that's how. Okay, now that's clear now. I get it. Okay, so you're saying going to a white national conference or something like that. That's what you mean by that.
Yeah, and there are also white nationalist Christian libertarians, and they hold their own functions, and it's very well known within the libertarian community that they have their own sect of these individuals as well.
Okay, so you're
claiming agreed. The Libertarian Party and libertarian groups are insanely varied, and that's part of the glory of being libertarian. And yes, there are absolutely white supremacists in libertarian groups. That's agreed, 100% true. I didn't know. I was wondering about the Congress. That's what I was worried about. But I see what you're defining it. Michael, she defines it now at least. So
yeah, well, now we have a definition. We have individuals. Okay. So you're saying it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, which really, going by factual evidence that exists, it doesn't apply. And I would say Joe Biden is probably more likely to be under your ruling, more of that white supremacist, looking at his history of legislation, his history of words and statements and flubs that he has made, and far, far worse. We could say the same thing about Ilhan Omar. We could say the same thing about Rashida Tlaib. We could say
I'm sorry, anybody who goes to an America First political action conference and supports
anyone who believes in America First. Oh, so MAGA is evil. Okay, thank you for explaining that to me. That's ridiculous.
White supremacy is evil. Yes.
White supremacy, yes, but you are equating it with so many other things, and this is the part of the reason
anti-Semitism is evil.
This is part of the reason why in real world, not academia, when real world we're trying to understand what are the authoritarian governments and how do they impede individuals' lives, which is ultimately the real thing we're looking
So let me touch this
with.
piece here. You guys brought up white supremacy and anti-Semitism, right? And I guess the reason why I bring this up is those are always the reasons, good and bad, both sides, for authoritarian rule, right?
I think they're tools. I don't think they're necessarily the reasons. I think sometimes the individuals in leadership truly believe that this one specific group of people are bad and that somehow the world would be better without their existence on the planet. But I think generally it's easier to maintain that power, and it has to do with the power structure rather than necessarily whatever.
But here's my point:
they're assigning to people.
You saying anti-Semitism is evil.
Yes.
It's not that I'm going to fight you on this. What I'm saying is I can use this to be authoritarian both ways. I can be like 1940s Germany and say, see, anti-Semitism, they're bad people. crush them, put them in camps, kill them. That's option one. Or I can go to say more like today in America and say, you are not allowed to say or do things. We will not trade with you. We will not give you a job because we think
there are 9 different types of violence, and economic violence is one of them.
Correct. So we can use economic violence to support.
These are pathways of indirect violence versus direct violence.
When we start to say things like white supremacy is evil, anti-Semitism is evil, aren't we literally giving people the tools and making the tools stronger, use authoritarianism against us either way? And in fact, not just that, creating enemies.
I don't think that coming to the moral stance that those things are evil is necessarily going to be the guiding principle for like direct action against someone. Saying that someone who does violence against someone based off of the color of their skin, saying that that's an evil act, I don't think that that justifies necessarily like a retaliative act. That in itself is like a whole different conversation, and there is a wide array of what people believe should be retaliation for the practices of violence. Some people believe peace and forgiveness. Some people believe, hey, you cast a stone, we're going to hit you right back.
An ongoing, continuous attack against an individual. We're not talking about someone slapping.
Me calling you evil and making somebody feel bad isn't going to have like the same long-term effects as saying every person who speaks white supremacy should be put in prison. That's a completely different conversation, and you can't compare those two.
But let me walk down this road, though, right? If you're walking down this road and saying everyone who goes to this or everyone who is this is bad, in whatever way we say that, you're saying then that words are not violence. But a lot of people on the left, if I were to say, well, there's no such thing as trans people, they would say, I don't believe that. But I'm saying if I said that, they would say, oh, well, that's violence because you're erasing us. We've been told that genocide. That's phrases they've used.
I understand that framing, and I don't agree with that framing. And I think we've had like lots of conversations about it, but I'll just reiterate that again, that having somebody tell their truth, even if it's something that hurts your feelings or feels like it's an act of dehumanizing you. Yes, that's horrible, but that at the end of the day, those are words and they haven't actually impacted your direct ability to exert your own freedom. Right? It's about your freedom. You say something to me, fine, whatever. But it's when those people who have direct control or power over lots of people and they say something really bad about Jews or white people, say something really bad about Black people, and then all of a sudden there's a group of people who do violence based off of that person of power's like words, then that's an issue that we can start to say, okay, words, that person's word had power and there should be some sort of action taken.
You mean like the Tennessee trans shooter? Okay, so that may be one of the examples, or maybe the young kid in Texas just a couple of years ago. I forget his name now, but let's try and really understand the way you're shaping the argument, because I understand that's the way you define it, but we can go to any college in America right now and you can ask any of the professors throughout most of the colleges in America and you will get an overwhelming response that will tell you that to misgender someone, to mispronoun them, to not speak in a very specific non-human manner is going to be the akin to violence. It is
if
microaggressions.
If your employer decides that is something they don't want you to do and they decide to fire you because you violated your terms of employment, that's on every business to decide what those terms of employment are.
No, that's not a term of employment.
It is for lots of people. It is a term of employment.
Hold on. If that is okay, if it's okay to fire somebody for someone saying, whatever, trans people are bad or whatever is the thing, that's the one of the day. I'm sure it was race before or whatever, or to say free Palestine or whatever. If that's okay, I mean, that to me seems odd that we can regulate all other parts of employment. We can tell people how much they can get paid, how long they can work, when they should be paid overtime. We can do all those things, but it's okay for them to be fired. There's a line that I start seeing, what are we crossing? We're only crossing the lines that we want to cross.
And I don't feel like the government has as much involvement in people's employment as you think it might, because we still are, regardless like of minimum wage, what enforcement do they have over wages on private businesses here in the United States?
It has huge impact,
massive
on every aspect of it.
I have literally told most of my people when I train them, if they're entrepreneurs, go out of your way to never employ anybody, because the second you employ somebody, the punishment begins. And that is how New York State works. The second you employ somebody, the punishment begins. And that's not an
That's
exaggeration.
state though, right? Not
that.
federal. I'm talking about federal level.
At all levels.
I think state's worse. I agree. But
yeah,
Michael's
no,
right. It is
by
also
state
federal.
by state. And so I try not to like blanket make things about state laws and things like that, because states are so different.
I think there's something that we need to interject here, because it's not just when we have this conversation, what is authoritarianism?
Yeah, I feel
it's not just
we kind of went off the rails
governments. It's also it's much more individualized than that. It is more a group. It is at the state level. It is at the
it's at a government level.
No,
Authoritarianism has to do with government.
It has to do with
oppression. It can't be applied to like a group of non-governmental people.
It has to deal with oppression. We see that with organizations, and the organizations don't have to be nation states. We see that with the left. We see that with Hamas. We see that with extremist organizations.
That's a government.
You wanted to point out the neo-Nazis as being extremists, and I agree, they are extremists, but you wanted to say, well, that's another form of authoritarianism.
You have political parties.
That's what I said.
Pursuing a government that can be authoritarian, but a group of just like an individual, they're not an authoritarian.
There would be a dictator.
Regime.
Same thing.
No. What I'm getting at here is, doesn't government either affect or by default control or encourage individual communities to act, right? And I'm going back to the Godwin's law. I'm going back to 1940s Germany. Right, in this case, in the 1930s, with Kristallnacht, when these weren't only government officials who were breaking the windows and attacking the Jews. These were actual regular German people also doing.
The government's
it, right?
made up of regular people, though.
Yes, but I'm saying that communities aren't by default government. Are we saying every person?
But they're a part of they assign themselves a political association to a party and then do violence in the name of that political association.
Well, let's say when you were I'll go back to America then, when there were people who were angry at the local black kid who tried to say hi to the local white girl, and then the local gangs or local guys got together and lynched him.
Right, that's horrible, government. But that's not authoritarian. That's not an authoritarian. Like, you wouldn't assign that term.
That's corrupt.
But hold on. But now, so what's happening now in this case, when we talked about authoritarianism earlier, if that's the case, we are literally limiting what in this specific case we're talking about, what young black men can do. They are not allowed to talk to white women. If they do so, they will die.
But that's not the.
Hold on. And the government will do nothing about it. And the community will do nothing about it. This person now is limited in what they may do. They may not talk to a white woman. They may not do that. They do that, they will die, and no one will stop them. Isn't that authoritarianism or no?
No, I wouldn't assign that as authoritarianism. No.
Okay.
Based on individuals, no. Now, if the town has that, if that's a law in the town, if that is a law that is
so I was right with the law thing the whole time.
Well,
I think you can have laws, but not all laws are written down.
Well, that's what I was about to say is it enforced? Is it a policy that is being enforced in the town? Then at that point, yes, it becomes authoritarian. Now, at that point, it is and I'll use a term and go right to the left for it. Oh boy, it's a systemic system to put that oppression in, and that is an organized, directed oppression. I think that's very important. It's kind of like what we see with Hamas. It's kind of like what we see coming out of Iran. It's kind of like what we see from the Democratic Socialists of America. It's like what we see from the far left. This
let me
oppressive, directed
quick,
viewpoint.
Let me grab a quick super chat. This is from Roger. He says, Jim Crow Joe. He means Joe Biden. I know that because the left always calls Joe Biden Jim Crow Joe. Policy hurt blacks more than his rhetoric. When you go back in time, I don't know if Joe Biden does anything now that hurts anybody. I'm not sure what he does at all. But going back in time, for sure, that's absolutely true. Biden really was not a friend to Black America in his past. That is for sure. He wasn't. I would agree with that completely. He was not a friend to Black America. But of course, he's told us that if you don't vote for him, you're not Black. So I'm not sure. That's even worse, maybe. I bring that up kind of to reinforce kind of Charla's point, which is that Democrats aren't left. Again, they're left of the Republicans. That's true.
They're like
but there's a libertarian. Yeah, but they're just corporatists, right? I mean, and I'll give you a good example of this.
Of like the world, our political system is like the right half to right. Like we don't.
I'm going to give you one libertarian saying we have, and then I'm going to give you an example. Libertarian statement is Republicans or Democrats going to speed limit. That's our saying, right? Mm-hmm. Republicans, Democrats going to speed limit, right? The Democrats are going fast, Republicans just going a whole lot slower, but they're the same people doing the same damn thing. But the other thing I want to bring up is look at Cornel West. Now, Cornel West, when it comes to Democrats, is left. He is a left-leaning Democrat. That's for sure, right? Within the Democratic Party. He couldn't stay with the Greens. Why? Because Greens hate Democrats. And Cornel West wouldn't say that Joe Biden's a gangster. He only said Trump is a gangster. And when the Greens went to him and said, okay, and Joe Biden's a gangster too, he went, well, I'm friends with Joe. And I went, no. We're the Green Party. If we like Democrats, we'd be Democrats. We don't like Democrats because they're corporatists. We're Greens because they're corporatists.
I think it's confusing because it's not a line. Like political spectrum isn't a line. It's really like an X, Y, and Z axis. Yes. And you have liberalism, which goes into libertarianism. And then you have republicanism, which goes into equalitarianism. And then you have socialism and communism, nationalism and fascism, and corporatism and feudalism. So each has like a moderate whole that makes its way towards that center point. And then as we move out, we talk about the radical spheres.
The more we move out, the more radical we get.
Yeah. And in the United States, we've just always been taught that it's just like this single line. And so we don't understand that it actually is such a broader point of where you actually are. And I think that's also a result from the two-party system, right?
No,
if there's only two parties, then there's only a left and then there's only a right. And that's it.
It's limited time and a lack of education about our governance and what the systems of governance are in the world as well as in the United States. Also. We don't teach that anymore. So no, it's not about, it's absolutely about a failure in our education system. And that's it. It has nothing to do with it's a two-party system and they're really just one part. No, that's not it.
Let me grab a couple of comments.
Sure. Go ahead, Larry.
Okay. Dan says, Larry, Mike, and Charla, do you believe authoritarianism comes more from the left or the right? I think they're different types. I don't think they're the same types of authoritarianism at all. I think both have, to Charles' point, I think both have aspects without question. They're very different types though, too. I don't know. I'm shocked. Mike, what side would you say? I don't know what side you would say.
Actually, it's a circle. It's a circle. And if you go far enough into on one extreme, you wind up at the other. Ultimately, they all tend to go towards the same thing, which is, again, the elimination of individual rights and freedoms, the dehumanization of an individual. And we most clearly see that under communism, which is half a step away from socialism, which is the far left. So do I think the left will get you there faster? Yes. But if you went far enough to the right, you'd get to the same point.
I cannot agree more. I see that often. I always joke. I say, if you go far enough left, you get your guns back.
Right? I find that hard to believe.
Left, you get that.
I find that sometimes difficult to believe, though, as a woman, just because I feel like my rights as a woman are always under attack by the right. And so from my own personal perspective, my personal freedoms, access to healthcare and reproductive rights.
In which country?
Equal pay for the same job. There's just like protections. Yes, in the United States, protections against domestic violence and rape and sexual assault. I find that when I ask for these freedoms, it is the right who is continuously voting against them. So I have a hard time on a personal level believing that it's not the right that are advancing more authoritarian objectives over me and my own body.
Okay. Speaking of the subjectivism of Americans looking at it from their perspective, women in America have more rights, more freedom, and more
I don't give a
opportunity
shit
than
about
any
other
other
people's
nation.
rights in other countries, and that's a really
We're having
straw
this
point
discussion.
excuse.
No, we're having this discussion. You were just talking about the spheres and how it's very nuanced and there's more to it than that. And now you've said, and you've narrowed it down so it matches your political
We have
preference.
some of the worst.
Well, the answer is, because you were the one who brought up, if we were to compare
we have some
America's
of the highest sexual
left and
assault
right,
rates of any democratic country in the world. We have the highest infant mortality and mother mortality rates of any democratic industrial society in the world. So don't tell me that the world is far worse off for women than the United States.
You're changing the discussion, and I'm trying to stick with the things you have already said because you keep changing the goalposts. You said that left and right in America is so childish, and that you didn't say childish, but it's so limited our viewpoint because we're looking at the world from a very specific two-party flat plane system, and it's more spherical, and we have to look at the rest of the world. Well, I'm trying to do the same thing. You just did exactly that same thing, and I am pointing it out that you cannot play that, oh, when this is to my benefit and having this discussion, when we're talking about authoritarianism, America is just looking at it in a very narrow point of view, and then when it comes to something you believe in, a preference you have, oh, we're going to bring it down. That's authoritarian. That is an expression of authoritarianism.
You talk about your own personal rights all the time being taken away. You as a person, you as a family with your own family, you talk about your rights being taken away. But when I do it, I can't.
No, I don't talk about it. I talk about American rights.
Let's make this limited then. This is what Dan asked. I think he meant in America. I don't think he meant outside. Right. I think he meant in America when he said it. Does it come more from the left or from the right? And my response was, I think it comes from both, but a very different way for each. Michael, you were clear. You thought it came more from the left. Charla thinks it comes more from the right.
It's hard to believe, though, that it's the left when the left hasn't been in power and that the current affront on people's rights have not come from any left. It's come from the Democrats.
Let me tell you where I see it. Let me tell you where I see it, Charla. I think you are correct. I don't think you are wrong when you're saying direct attacks against women have come far more from the right than left. I think that's true. But there's a huge but here. Actual controlling mechanisms. The left has been in control for a long time and has done far more in that regard. What I mean by that. You just said
a couple episodes ago that the left had never been in control of the government, that it's always been the center right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Democrats. I screwed up. I said the left. I'm sorry. Democrats. You're right. I misspoke. Democrats. Now, Democrats within our very limited left-right paradigm, which I agree with you, it is very limited. Within that limited paradigm, the Democrats have been just as bad, if not worse, when it came to creating systems. Democrats talk about systemic issues, but then they're the ones who create the horrible systemic issues, right? They're the ones who created these terrible things. They made the war on drugs far worse. Republicans started it with Nixon. They began the war on drugs, but Democrats have made it 20 times worse than Nixon ever did.
That's why I don't see Democrats as being left. I would consider them a part of the right.
But they are.
But if I then went to the rhetoric of Democrats is without question left, right? Their actual actions are not.
We talked about that too, about their rhetoric.
Absolutely left. There's no question.
They co-opted leftist rhetoric to gain votes from, granola.
But when the left gets in charge, the left creates a different form of authoritarianism too. They do.
Yes, it can.
But you're right. It's generally not anti-woman.
No, it's generally not anti-woman or anti-queer or
correct.
Yeah.
It's generally not that. That's a good general rule. It's not anti-woman. That's correct. Used as more of a right wing. However, they do it. And the example is, if I could try to give one that might make sense, is people who don't believe the narrative get just pushed out. They get excommunicated from society, from jobs, they get financially punished, they get socially devastated constantly. And the example I'll give you, I might have brought this up earlier, is my daughter had to submit something for for a large company an idea to get submitted to see if they can make like a TV show or something about it. My daughter's a cartoonist, and there were like 30 different 30 different entries. Every single one of them was somehow based on someone who was a gay or queer or somehow part of the GSM community in some way, shape, or form. Why? My worry was, and I don't think that every single kid who gave it actually thought that or is part of that community. I'm sure some were. But if everyone had that, they believed that's what was going to work. They self-censored themselves and they made sure they had that as a centerpiece in everything they put together. That's the
Are
type.
queer people responsible for those feelings, though?
No. But what I'm saying is this is an institutional or systemic left. That's what I mean. I don't think the individual kids, I'm sure some of those kids were part of the GSM community. I'm sure some of them were. And I'm sure some of them would have produced that type of content regardless. I'm sure that's true, right? But 30 out of 30, no way. Maybe 5 out of 30 might have done that. Not 30 out of 30. No way. And that's the type of authoritarianism.
So interesting to me because New York is so much more there than let's say like the Midwest where I'm from, where these aren't even like topics of conversation more generally in
both
people's communities. It's very different. So I feel like speaking to your experience portrays one aspect of a lived experience in the United States that can be different from the other portions of the United States.
The centers of power in the United States are aligned with the coastal regions of the United States, which happen to be dominated in most cases by the progressive left of the United States. That just tends to happen. California, New York, Illinois, Texas, and Florida are offsetting, but then they are also turning purple. Huh?
That's all countries in port cities. There tends to be the place of most education.
Those tend to be the largest centers of people, but not necessarily the largest political ideology of that nation, especially as we see it here in the United States, which has an overwhelming left-leaning. New York is bluer than blue. California is bluer than blue. They're progressive as hell. Why? And they happen to be two of the largest pushes towards progressivism in the world and in the United States. Well, at least in the United States, let's say that. And you have Illinois adding on to that again. So when you say
but this is
there's
urban
two narratives,
centers.
it's very clear what one of the narratives is, and it is the one that is leading.
Mike, this is, you know this, you it's urban centers, right? You go outside of the urban centers of New York State, it's redder than red, right? If you if you're in a farmland of New York State, it's red. That's Trump country. Literally, you can drive by. You've seen that, Mike. I'm preaching to the choir.
Yes,
You've seen it. You can actually go out there and you can see farms painted Trump.
It's
painted
same
by hand on their. Yeah, you can see it painted on their barns.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is definitely an urban piece. Let me
so I guess for me, like when we're talking about that, when do you see like left leaning big signs all over the countryside? Like for me personally, when I'm driving through my state, I just see like a lot of mega signs, a lot of religious signs. Like it feels very
I see it all
forced and very
but if you're in any town, and I'll give you New York State an example. If you drive through even some of the urban centers in upstate New York, Ithaca, Albany, you drive through urban centers in New York, you will still see Ukraine flags, BLM fists. You actually still see Biden-Harris signs. You will still see Biden-Harris signs. You'll see the BLM fist.
But those are for giving freedoms. They're not talking about taking away freedoms. And I think that that's the difference in theology, is that MAGA is directly talking to reducing reproductive rights, stopping immigration.
BLM.
That's associated with feelings of terror. Whereas when I see
that's the left.
A gay
but hold on.
I feel like
I've got to be clear on here.
Opening up a conversation where
we
have more freedoms.
No. Okay, I have to be clear on this one, and I'm trying to take this from what I think is. I don't know if I'm neutral. I'm not a Democrat or Republican, is what I will say. I don't know if I'm neutral, but I'll give you from my point of view is what I'll say. Someone who's seen both and traveled the state many times. When a person who leans right sees the trans flag, they see that as exclusionary. They do not see that as inclusive. They see that as, and I feel it myself too, and I'll be very forward. Mm-hmm. I'm not in no way anti-trans. I happen to love the rainbow flag because I thought the rainbow flag, in my view, this is just my personal opinion, I thought it meant we're all together, right? That's why I love that. I literally have a shirt with the rainbow flag on. I love the rainbow flag. I thought it was awesome. I literally go to the pride parades here in New York City, right? I thought it was amazing. Once they added the trans flag, I felt like I was excluded. It made me feel like I'm not part of it anymore. Like now I can't even be an ally. Like I can be nothing. So my image of that flag is not inclusive. Now the rainbow flag is. This is the first time
I've ever heard anyone explain it that way to me.
And I'm telling you that I'm not alone.
Not
when
nearly.
I see the rainbow flag, I feel like I'm part of the group. I can be an ally. That's how I feel. And I'm giving you just my emotion. When I see the trans flag, I think, oh, this is not for me. These people are not my people. They don't want me. I'm not here to be with them. That is how, and this is why somebody, if you've noticed, when they were doing rainbow flags and raising the rainbow. Hold on 1 second.
Sorry.
1 second. When people raise the flags, you see them, they've been raising the pride flag for decades. Nobody cared. They started raising the trans flag. People are fighting it now because the trans flag feels like you don't want us. It feels exclusive. So go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, for me, I think personally, like when I see a mega flag or a sign, I have like the knee-jerk reaction, not just because of the rhetoric that's political in public, but also because I have had people from the right like verbally attack me.
Yep, me too.
And had really like bad interactions with them. I've had bad interactions with like far leftists too. So let's not like say that you can't have both.
Yeah.
But for me, I've never had a bad interaction with a trans person that made me feel uncomfortable or attacked because I'm not trans.
No, I have. And it was, believe it or not, it was a Black trans woman who was so angry, and it wasn't directed at me. I viewed this. This was not directed. I viewed this. She was so angry because she thought people weren't doing enough for her. And she was mad, and she was acting like, you guys don't understand me. You can't be me. Why are you even here? And then, of course, the thing popped up. And this happened on a phone call with me in a political environment where someone said, I can't believe white men are even talking to me. That's her. I never forget those words. That was her words. Yeah. I can't believe white men are even talking to me. Yeah. That makes me feel like you don't even want allies. So why should I care? And that is what I've gotten from parts of the left.
I've had similar situations occur in a different context.
And that is why when you tell me about you see MAGA and you feel people who lean right, when they see those flags, they feel similar. They've had similar experiences of feeling non-inclusive, similar experience of not wanting help, similar things of dehumanizing. I remember this is a separate issue I was on. I think Howie Hawkins with me was on this one. And we had a woman who was part of the DSA, and she was upset, and she was talking trash, whatever, about how Joe Biden's great or whatever. And I'm like, these people screw you over. They don't care about you. Why would you even want to do this? They don't care about you. And she said, oh, and now I have two men talking to me about immediately. And I scolded her publicly. I just scolded her. I said, you don't get to play that game. Either your ideas are good or they're not. You're not going to play that game with me at all.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a cop-out.
But that's a common cop-out nowadays. You hear it all the time.
Charla, to say that I get where you're coming from. I would ask you to see that other people came for the same way about left symbol.
No, I completely recognize that flags and political symbology has different meanings for different people.
What's a MAGA flag? What's a MAGA flag? You mentioned a MAGA flag.
It says MAGA on it, or it says like Trump underneath it. Like there's a whole. Come to Michigan sometime.
Okay, I've seen people waving. I see
MAGA flags and Trump flags. I see them.
I've seen. Okay, that's people with. Okay, that.
Yeah, I've seen both.
I understand. I wouldn't call that a flag per se, but I get I see what you're going at with. Okay, but as in terms of what Larry was saying, I would say yes. There's a lot on the left that is very exclusionary. In fact, that's what DEI is all about. That's what equity is all about. Is about being exclusionary, which is somewhat authoritarian. It is, well, maybe ugliarchy, more. No, authoritarian. Where we are seeing
DEI is completely authoritarian and is failing right now in the business world, and it's about to be removed. It is failing horribly in the business world. It's on its way out. I've been saying it for decades. The shit doesn't work. It is nothing but bad. DEI always makes things worse. It is
Diversity and
absolutely
equity
true
and
in
inclusion
every
is
case.
rooted in the understanding that people feel safe and not psychologically harmed by the workplace based off of their feelings that people don't understand and or discriminate against a specific part
People
of their
didn't
identity.
feel-
I don't think that that's inherently bad. I think that it can be used to exclude people, but the principles of diversity and equity and inclusion are important. And
Useless.
Let me be very clear on two parts of this, and this is literally my living. This is literally how I pay my bills. I used to do this kind of training for years, and I stopped because it's garbage now. The principles you're speaking about are good principles. I agree. Literally, no DEI actually does that. What DEI training does in today's world,
we do it at Michigan State University,
and I'm sure it's worse. I'm sure it's worse because it's 100% rule. DEI makes things worse. DEI stops conversations. It stops learning. It stops all those things. What does work is emotional intelligence training. That actually works. When you do emotional intelligence training, people begin to realize that I am not everyone else. I don't think like everybody else thinks, and I should have conversations so that I can change and grow.
a good
That's
DEI
happened many
trainer
times.
should do that though, because
There's
I also
maybe-
used to do this type of training.
There's maybe 1 in 100 who do that. Maybe. Most of them don't. How do I know this for sure? I'll
Well,
tell you
that's
how I
because
know.
there's a bunch of people who jumped on the bandwagon and decided to call themselves DEI experts with zero training.
Yeah, or they went to Ibram X. Kennedy's school of grifting. one of those two, right?
Yeah.
They went to his school of grifting, right? It's a massive grift. I don't mean to be mean. I think equity is a wonderful idea. I agree. And I've taught it in the
No, it's
past.
not.
I'm with
It's
you.
not.
The concept is a good concept, but the only way you get to play is when you get people to actually change. What is happening in today's world with DEI is women are being hurt. You see it everywhere. They're not growing. You are seeing what's happening is there is a massive increase, which has been happening for years, in women being hired by government and big business only. They're not being hired by small businesses because everyone's afraid of them. They're not doing well in finance, everyone's afraid of them. It's happening again and again. Look at the numbers. What you will see is a massive increase in female entrepreneurs. That's what you will
One
see.
of the other things
Entrepreneurs, left and right.
One of the other things we should point out, and this is one of the tricks that is often used, is to say, oh, well, people feel so terrible now. They only feel terrible now about X, Y, and Z is because someone told them that they should be. Because before you told them that X, Y, and Z were things that are horrible and they should be feeling terrible about, people were going about their lives every single day and never complained about it once at all. Having been alive for half a century, watching the change from 1970 to 2020, I can tell you very easily, while life was never always easy, it's become easier. And I can tell you very much that many of the things that people are complaining about today is only because of how comfortable and easy things have been. And more importantly, because we have seen a continuous oppression from the left that have been saying, don't you miss this? Don't you feel like this? We have seen it in our movies, our TV, our news media, our social media, telling us over and over again how to feel about things because feelings are more important than truth. That's why they believe in
I feel like
an
oppressed
individual
people,
truth. And that's where we get this.
oppressed people are always going to fight for their freedoms.
What?
And
But
oppressed
hold
people are
on.
always going to fight for their freedoms, and they're always going
Are
to
you
feel their
telling me-
oppression.
Hold on. Are you telling me that young women now are oppressed in America?
Right now?
Yes, young women
I
now
can't even
are
go
oppressed in America.
outside alone at night.
That's a
What
joke.
are you talking about?
Hold on. Okay, several
That's a
things. I
joke.
want to be very clear on this. If you can't go outside alone at night, that's because of a police system. That's not because of an oppression.
It's the way that men are taught to feel and treat women.
That's crap.
That's
That's crap.
political. That's
That's
social.
crap.
That's
That is absolute
economic.
crap.
I
everything.
cannot
Absolute
believe
crap.
you're even saying that.
How is
I
that
can't-
unbelievable? That there's systematic sexism, just as there's systematic racism.
Okay,
in this
I will give you
country.
data right now. I will give you some data right now. When it comes to women under 30, that's why I said young women. Every metric, any way you want to measure, in any way you pick the metric, women are beating men. Any metric.
Because we fought for it. Because we talked about it. Because we
but there are
changed
also
the system.
7 million men who are now neat men. Neat meaning
My
not in
freedom doesn't
not
oppress
in education.
others.
But maybe it did And
no,
that's
it
my
didn't.
point.
It made people feel uncomfortable. And unfortunately, instead of growing up and growing forward, they decided to lean into their insecurities.
So
And that, again, is
7 million
not
men.
on women to not pursue
Hold
their
on.
freedom to make men feel comfortable.
So
Point blank.
7 million, hold on. So 7 million men stepping out of the workforce, stepping out of education, sitting in their basements. You don't worry about that. That's not a thing for you to
I do worry about that, but that's not because women got freedom. That's because we're suffering economically.
What I said, that's not what I said. What I said was, you said young women are oppressed. But there aren't 7 million young women
because we
who
are
have
oppressed.
Out.
Doesn't mean someone else isn't
women
oppressed.
Aren't oppressed.
It's a hard. I understand
Missing
that
my point.
Like,
I asked a very specific question. I said, "Are young women oppressed?" You said yes.
Yes, they
and
are.
I said, by every metric, they are winning, and their counterparts, which would be male,
except in healthcare.
No, they're not. Yes, they
Except
are.
in gender pay equality. Except
no, you are.
No, that's not true.
My dear, you are a PhD.
I am a PhD, and I can. I'll send you the articles.
Please send me data. Under 30 women make more money than men.
Yes.
For the same job, they make more money. They have a higher chance of being hired than men. That's facts right now. I said young, under 30.
How about you send me your data then? Because I'm always being questioned on me, but why don't you send me your data then?
I'm happy to. I will do so.
Great.
Yeah, no worries. I'll do so. In every way they have more friends. They have health care. They have more health insurance by percentage. So healthcare, no. Women under 30 are kicking ass in every way possible. There is no metric to where they're losing. In fact,
see, I know what it is.
Have a higher chance of violence. Men have under 30. Men have a higher chance of being raped. I'm not joking. I will give you all of that data. Everything. The young women are doing amazing in America. In no way are they losing. But people still believe they're losing. They're not. Now, don't mean older women still who came through. They still got issues. I get it. I'm not saying them. I was very specific in my group. And why did I say that? Because that's the future. The future is not oppressed women. That is not the future. I know I
hope that you're right.
The talent is in women.
Not even a question.
You're right.
It's not even a question. It's not even a doubt. It's not something that's even in doubt. But it is something that we are supposed to feel is in doubt. It is a tool of oppression and authoritarianism to make you feel this way, so you will obey.
I don't feel it. I live it. I'm still not paid as much as my male colleagues. I'm still not able to walk down the street alone.
I don't mean to be a nudge, but
I almost died having a baby.
You're one woman.
Like,
hold on, Charla. Are you under 30?
I have to take birth control. Men don't have to worry about it.
Charla, are you under 30?
I'm 34.
So you are not part of who I was talking about. That's what I'm saying. I was very specific.
I know lots of women under the age of 30 who experience the same things I do on a daily basis.
And I know tons, and hold on, and they are under no worse pressure than young men who are killing themselves.
I never said they were under more oppression or less oppression, so please don't put words in my mouth.
So hold on. Are you saying they're all, hold on. Are you saying they're all oppressed then? Everyone under 30 is oppressed?
Women are oppressed. We are not allowed to say, do, think, or act in the same way that most men are.
So do Republicans, so do black men, so do Hispanic men.
No evidence of this.
But again, this
doesn't. If you are under 30, I see no evidence of this.
Doesn't denigrate
under 30, I see no
anything to do with black people's experiences or other people's experiences.
I can say this about any group.
Experiences.
I can say that is vague and absolutely incorrect by all data that has been out there. Larry is mentioning it. We can go through the New York Times. We can go through MSNBC, CNN.
Please make this data public.
True. It's a feeling. It is something we are told by the left.
That you need data, but I will send it. It's so obvious to me. I never thought I had to come up with the data. You see it in everything, but I will do it for you. I talk the talk. I will walk the walk, Charla. I will walk. I talked it. I will walk it. I will. I'm blown away by that. Women under 30 are killing it every way, shape, or form.
Women between the ages of 12 to 34 are the highest risk years for rape and sexual assault.
That maybe they're years. Yes, I don't doubt that. Sure. I don't doubt because I don't doubt that. But now compared to men. That's all I'm saying.
It's still better than men's. I 100% guarantee you.
Okay. Okay, we'll check that out then.
Sexual violence or just violence?
Let me.
I'm talking about sexual violence. If you're talking about violence, that's a different set of statistics.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so maybe we're off on that. We may be off on that one, but let me grab a couple of super chats if I could. Roger says, as long as you have low voter turnout, we'll never know how people really feel. All states need to allow voters to place their own amendments on the ballot to ratify. I think that's a very valid point.
That's a great idea, and I wish we would do that. But I don't think Democrats or Republicans want us to.
You are correct. Roger O says, Vass, the left in power doesn't represent the left. I think that's true. 7.6 million New York City population. Out of that, 5.2 registered to vote. Yet in elections, only 1 million come out to vote. I do think that's true. A lot of people have given up. The left has given up too in many cases too. I think both have given up. In New York State, the right has given up because it's just so left. The state's so left, the right has given up. But I think even some parts of the left have given up because they feel like it's just not worth it.
Why do you think people on the right stay in New York?
If many of them, they're leaving.
Well, there's some.
We're losing 300,000 people every year in New York State. The vast majority of them are right. They stay for 3 reasons. One, because they're waiting for an elderly parent to pass.
Yes.
2, because they're waiting for a child to graduate.
Yes.
3, they are connected to a job and they're waiting to retire in some way, shape, or form. Those are the 3 biggest reasons why people stay. There are some others, like some people like love to hunt or something. There are some.
No.
Some are connected to farms here or there, but those are rare. The majority is those 3 reasons.
That's followed by property, I would say. Trying to they have
some
property,
are linked to
they're trying to either sell it or develop it, and that's the 4th biggest thing I've heard.
But they are leaving then in droves.
100%.
Oh yeah, massive.
100%. I go up. In fact, by the way, I am going upstate this weekend, guys. I am heading up this weekend. I will be in Schenectady tomorrow night, Hamilton County, Herkimer County, and Montgomery County on Saturday, and on Sunday I will be in Otsego, then Ulster, and then Rockland County. So I will be traveling again. And every time I travel, almost everybody who I talk to is talking about leaving in some way. Like, next year, 10 years, once my kid graduates, as soon as I finish my job, once my mom, when she passes away. I hear that all the time. So
you know where they want to go?
Yes.
South
Most
Carolina,
want to go
Texas,
to 1 or 2
Florida.
places. Yes, either south like Florida, or they want to go close because they haven't really given up yet. So they kind of want to go to Pennsylvania so they can stay kind of close, or Jersey. They can hope they can stay close. And I was joking. I say Jersey and Pennsylvania are just stop-offs before they go to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So, but people who've really given up go right to Florida. People who haven't tend to go to either Pennsylvania or Jersey first, then realize it still sucks, and then go to Florida.
Well, the biggest ones are Texas, North Carolina, and Florida.
Yeah, that too also.
Those are the 3 biggest destinations when you're leaving either from California or from New York, because New York and California, the 2 progressive capitals,
100%.
are having the same response.
Massive loss of population.
For since 1960, actually, in New York, since 1958, this process has been going on.
The biggest, not a drop, lack of growth is true, Mike, but actual drop has actually happened since around 2014, give or take, is when actual decline. Because we were growing so much because of immigration. We were the slowest growing state, but we were actually still slowly growing. Now we're actually down to losing population. New York State
since 1958. The reason why we've been losing so many members of Congress is since 1958, we have been actually losing population. And that's why we've lost over 22 members of Congress in representation, because of our population decrease. And it's been happening since 1960. It actually started in 1958.
The biggest actual decline that we just lost.
The biggest decline, you're right. The biggest
correct,
has been in 2014 and since.
Yep.
But it has been continuously happening.
So New York State is losing horribly. So to your point, Charlotte, that's why they're leaving. You can't function here anymore, right? Everyone here who is not part of the government feels oppressed. They all feel oppressed. They feel like I can't do anything. I get stopped. I go to jail. I get in trouble. I get fined. They all feel that, and that's why they leave. This is not a business-friendly state at all. It's not business-friendly at all, and it's not entrepreneur-friendly. It's not. New York is old money. It's old money friendly. That's what New York
I
State
mean,
is.
I could catch that.
It's
vibe.
old money friendly. Yes. If you're old money, you're good here. If you're not old money, you're not welcome here. You're just not. And that's how the state works. And people think New York is a very progressive state in that regard. It is not in that regard. In that regard, it's very conservative. We're very much about old money.
Yeah,
So
I feel like there's like a protectionist class of
100%.
Democrats that kind of go around passing laws that protect old money and wealth.
100%.
But use the leftist talking points to garner the favor of well-educated youth.
100%. Well, that's the problem. Democratic Party is becoming the party of educated liberals. It's becoming the party of educated liberals. That's what it's becoming of.
Elitist.
And
yes,
which are elitists. It's becoming that party, which is why so many people on the left who are not Harvard, that are running away from it.
Harvard, Stanford, Yale kind of graduate.
And this is the part that bothers me, is that the people on MSNBC who claim to be the left, who claim to be oppressed because they're black women or Hispanic women or black men, all went to Harvard and Yale and all have jobs where they make 6 figures a year and all scream that they're being oppressed and they represent me.
Yeah.
They're neither oppressed nor they represent me.
I would say that's prolific of like social movements in general, because as you said, like if you don't have a strong middle class, you can't have a social movement, A,
100%.
but B, it like always tends to be like the upper to mid class that leads those discussions. And I've seen that like happen a lot in the women's movement and in the Black Lives Matter movement, where it was like the people who went to Harvard, like Black Lives Matter. When I was living in Boston, I went to UMass Boston. They had the chapter, but they didn't have one for Boston. They had one for Cambridge. And those from Cambridge were representative of the entirety of Boston. And whenever someone pointed out that like, that's not, your issues are not the issues of the rest of the majority of Boston, they would get very angry.
Well, you actually had a bunch of people commenting about your religious piece. I'm going to bring up a couple of those. Let's see here. P says, if you're a real Christian, you love God, your neighbor, and treat others as you wish to be treated. Oh, that's wonderful. I like that.
True.
That's wonderful. I do like that.
Yes, you should.
They do.
Jen says that Jen says that Jesus was raised Jewish. That's true.
Very true.
Absolutely true. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
He was Arab.
Yep, absolutely.
No,
let's see if I can grab this.
Not Arab.
Well, Jewish Arab. You can be Arab. Arab is a race.
That depends on what Jewish person you're talking to. Yeah. Some Jewish people would agree with you, some would not.
Arab Israelis call themselves Arab Israelis.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is some Jewish people would disagree with you, is all I'm saying. I don't make a decision on that. Some Jewish would disagree with you.
That's why Arab Israelis had to go to a separate school till 1992.
There we go. So yes. Matt seems to does not like religion because religion is a problem, not a solution. Matt doesn't like it at all. Yes. Rick says, neo-Christian isn't a term anyone is familiar with. White Christian nationalist is likely the name you want to use. I have heard that before.
That one,
I have
heard that. And it's been debunked dozens of times because it's not applicable, really.
But I do think there are people who are that. You think there are people who would not?
No, I think there are individuals. You can definitely say there are individuals like that. But then again, I could say, well, there are black socialists.
Black communists. I had them on my show.
Women, like Patrice Clores, BLM. We're talking about her.
Means, like the Christians who kind of look at the current political philosophy of
the Christianity is not the fact
in the United States.
Socialism.
It's this Judo-Christian.
No, I disagree, Mike. You're wrong on this one, brother. And let me tell you why you're on this one, just to be clear. If you look at, again, I'm going back to the Godwin's level, going back to the German 1940s. Were they actually socialists? Yes and no, right? Were the Nazis left? Yes and no. And what I mean by that is they were left for Germans. Their socialism was literally for an ethnic group. They believed Germans were right. Germans got to be in unions. Germans got to have the social services. If you weren't German, you got the camp, you got second-class citizen, you got whatever. So they were right in that regard, meaning right-leaning in that regard, but they were also left-leaning within a social group.
I think the issue for Nazi Germany was that the Socialist Party was the party in power and was most preferred by the German people. So Hitler overtook the Socialist Party and
That's not
used
accurate.
socialism
No.
as
No,
the
no, no, no,
name.
No.
Not accurate.
No.
The literally the Nazi Party
No.
was less than 1/3 of the Reichstag. It was not. He was appointed by Chancellor Hindenburg.
Yeah.
You can check it out if you want to. Chancellor Hindenburg appointed Hitler into his power. He was not elected into power. And the Nazi Party had less than 1/3 of the Reichstag at the time. This was a political move by Hindenburg, who was ill, and he then promoted Hitler to the chancellor. That is how he came to power. The Nazi Party was a minor party in Germany when Hitler became to power.
Right, I know that, but his party then killed the Democratic Socialists, and they took over the socialist flag as
What
if
he
it
took-
was
what he
they
took
would
over
themselves
was the
were
organization
socialists,
called-
but I don't think in practice they were
You can
actually
check-
socialists.
You can check the history on this one. What he killed was leaders of the SA, which was the Socialist Army. I forgot what the SA stood for, and then replaced it with the SS. But he simply killed the leadership of that.
Right,
A
the
guy named
leaders of the
guy named
Socialist Party.
Ernst Röhm, if I remember
The
the right guy's
SPD.
name. Yes, he just took over that. He took that head. The brown shirts became the black shirts,
Exactly.
right? But the brown shirts were still, they were less than 1/3 of the Reichstag. They were not the major party. They
No,
were not.
I never said that the Nazis were the major party. The socialists, the Social Democrats, the SPD, and the KPD were the two dominant parties during Hitler's uprising.
Correct, but he was not a member of those parties. He was a member of the
No.
Nazis.
He was not he was a member of the SPD before he was a member of the Nazis. He helped to co-form the Nazi movement.
You mean in the 20s?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes. But when he took over in the 30s, he was not a member of that. I don't know why we're having this conversation. It's like a crazy conversation to have.
Anyways.
In any case,
It's interesting.
yes,
but,
in any
you know,
case,
I'm more concerned
and-
about the current day and the direction of the authoritarianism we see that leads Iran, Hamas to attack Israel. I'm worried about I know we're dead out of time, but I'm more concerned about the authoritarianism we see from people like Ilhan Omar, Anna Presley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, BLM, and Patrisse Cullors, the far left, that are all trying to oppress people, to dehumanize them, and to micromanage their lives, which I feel is authoritarianism. And we see that in their legislation that they are putting out there, the language they are putting out there, the way they are trying to teach kids in schools. And this is why we get to have kids in Harvard, in our colleges, who are not oppressed at all. They are some of the most benefited in the world.
privileged.
And they're turning around and
Privileged.
going, yeah, absolutely privileged. And they're turning around and saying, oh my God, we've got to help the terrorists. We've got to help the terrorists. Send them more money so they can commit more terror.
Let me quickly have Dave, he helped me out here. The SA stood for the Strung-Einteilung. So sorry, it was the SA that he took out. And he's right also, it wasn't Chancellor Hindenburg, it was President Hindenburg who made Hitler the chancellor, and then there was no president. So yes, Dave is obviously student of history. He clarified that for me, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave.
But
Yes.
I think that the
Charla, go
same
ahead.
claims could be made of Israel being an authoritarian government.
No.
They just took over their judicial system in
No.
a right wing.
No, of course you could say that. Come on now.
No, they're not. When you have a group, an organization,
They
of
oppress
individuals
their
that
own people, and if you are not falling in line
They
with the
oppress their
Israeli
own
government,
people?
they call you a fake.
Yes.
Wait a minute. There's a difference between having political debates and attacking your political opponents. I understand that completely.
They're not
But
attacking
tell
their
me,
political
you're
opponents,
telling
they're
me that there are
attacking themselves,
Jews
their
in
own
Israel.
people.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that Jews in Israel are being oppressed by other Jews in
Yes,
Israel.
all
Yes!
the time.
Really?
Yes.
What's the legislation?
Yes.
Give me an example.
Yes,
What's an
Sure.
example?
They live
the
in a
rights
free
of Arab
state.
Israelis are being taken away all the time. They take
Yep.
away ultra conservative Israeli ability to
punish
practice their
the
own religion
Orthodox Jews all the time.
all
They
the
punish
time.
them.
I know there is a division in the
time.
differences in practice of Judaism.
Also,
That's the religion.
they
I'm
take
talking about the
women's
government.
rights away. Like the article I sent you last week was written by an Israeli American woman who talks about how the current judicial system has been trying to strip women of their rights and their freedom to speech. So, I mean, they're again,
I'm not
it's hard to say
anti-Israel.
that a
I'm just
specific
being
country
real.
is
They act as everyone else does.
authoritarian.
I do not.
I would say
agree with that.
most countries who exert control whatever political party is in power, a lot of them can implement certain authoritarian practices because they want to
100%.
maintain power. It's not about the betterment of society. It's about the betterment of individuals.
And they
over
use
society.
war as their
Corruption.
excuse.
Again, that's not
They will
authoritarianism,
always
it's
use
corruption.
the Israelis are the same as us. We use security as an excuse to hammer people's rights. Israelis are the same thing. They use security as a reason to trash their own people. 100%
We
true.
train each other on it,
yes.
actually.
We do, literally.
Literally.
And New York City, by the way, yes, actually has a division in Israel. Because we literally train each other on this. Yes. Look, I don't mean to be mean. I'm just saying Israelis aren't any better than we are. They all oppress.
That's why we're their
all
unwavering partner.
There we go. They all oppress. Absolutely. Guys, we went way too long again. I'm so sorry, Charlie. You can be so mad at me. We always go too long on this damn show. We need to make this a 7-hour show. Anyway, so guys, I want to say thank you so much. And before you do anything,
Thanks,
please
Larry.
do me a favor. I've been keeping this on the bottom. Please follow Charla. Please follow at Venture Novelist on Instagram. And please follow Mike at MV Consult on Twitter. All the details are in the show description. They keep giving us this great back and forth. They keep giving us their time. Show them some love. Follow them. See what they're doing. It does matter. I will see you all very soon.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Mike. Have